fireworks ordinance. I have one change I'd like to suggest to the committee on the violations. Municipal violations are limited to $500. And I would like to suggest that, without objection, if we could move the first offense to $100, second offense to $250, and the third offense to $500. The rest of the ordinance matches exactly the county's ordinance.
Is that section 14108D,
D.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, 14108D.
And you're suggesting
$100 for first offense, $250 for second offense, and $500 for third offense.
And I just want to ask, just for clarity, we don't have authority over $500.
Not for criminal penalties, but this is civil, so I would recommend that you adopt what Councilman Duvall is recommending.
Okay. And I just wanted the record, so it can be done with civil, but we're looking at a more.
Keeping it in line with our $500 limit, even though it's a civil penalty rather than a criminal penalty. The change here would be to have 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. is the time that you cannot shoot the fireworks. And then change it to 1 a.m. to 7 a.m. on July the 5th, which would be the night of July the 4th. And January 1st. Without objection, we will report that back up to legal to check, to make those changes and prepare for the agenda.
What,
We drafted this amendment to match the counties. The wording of the county is a little confusing to some, Chief Jenkins pointed out, because it leaves a gap between 10 and 1, and it's not addressed. So I think if y'all will let legal try to make it a little more clear from the city side, it does match the county's language word for word, but.
What about the July 5th?
Yeah, it prevents it, normally it tends to cut off, we change the cutoff to 1, but the way this is worded, it leaves a gap between 10 and 1 to where if you read it word for word, it makes it seem like you can't shoot. So if we could just try to clear that up, which means our language won't exactly match the counties if we clear it up.
You're talking about just the section B?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
It does seem a little confusing.
And what about the other holidays that were suggested by other members of council?
Yeah, other council members also recommended that we adopt the holidays that were adopted by Lexington, which weren't adopted by Richland. So that's a question. If y'all would like us to include the additional holidays, we can do that.
We have a list of
Do
those.
you have a list of those?
The only one I think that was mentioned specifically was Diwali or the Indian holiday?
I think this is sufficient.
I do too.
This would match the counties.
Yeah, let's match the counties.
Richland County.
Right.
Yeah.
Any other questions on that subject? Our main presenter today is Trayvon Fordham, who is our Director of Violent Crime Prevention. He's been with us for several months now, and we would like for Trayvon to give us a briefing on what you've done and what you plan to do.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody.
Yeah.
Trayvon Fordham, again, Director for the Office of Violent Crime Prevention. I'm just going to go through this PowerPoint presentation to provide you with a brief overview of what the office is doing and the plans moving forward. Before I get started, just a beautiful picture of our skyline because it's always majestic to see. All right, so I'm going to take this from 3 different stages. Stage 1, of course, is where we were. Stage 2 is going to look like where we are. And then stage 3 is going to look at where we're going. So stage 1 is that assessment phase. Coming in today actually marks the 90th day of the office being in existence. And my hiring, or so my hiring, And so initially when I came in, there was this framework that really focused on the people, places, and behaviors, in addition to a framework that looked at prevention, intervention, and enforcement, right? So we've got all these different factors and aspects. And one of the things as far as from an assessment standpoint that I've done is really get out and look at where we are as a city in identifying the people, places, and behaviors, but also looking at where we are when it comes to prevention, intervention, and enforcement. And I'll get to that a little bit later. So with the assessment that I've been conducting so far, I've been examining the initial framework, really establishing contacts for strategic partners. Some of those are our educational partners. Some are working with our healthcare partners. A lot of also internal departments with the City of Columbia as well. When we talk about Parks and Recreation, who's doing different events. When we talk about community development, who's also doing housing programs and also as far as other financial assistance programs. So really looking at all of the things that the city's doing existing, but also working with other strategic partners. Again, conducting that pre-assessment, which will be concluded and will be prepared and distributed as well. Attending a lot of community events to really get out and talk to different community organizations, find out what the pulse is, find out where, or identify some of their thoughts and perspectives. Because the only way this is going to work when it comes to violence prevention and reduction is that we have buy-in working with our communities. So that's been very important, but also meeting with community groups as well. I think from a list that I've received, I've gone through that list, met with just about everybody. There are a few that we're still going to meet with that's scheduled, but we've met with a lot of different community groups, heard what they had to say, and really taken that input and it'll be part of the assessment as well.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the community groups or what the community vibe is or the community concern? Can you just kind of dig into that a little bit and give me a feel for the anxiety I think that's out there in the community?
Yeah, so definitely. It ranges. It's ranged from going to different communities and different districts in the cities. Some of the things that I'm hearing is that as far as discharging or a lot of gunshots that they're hearing, to others saying that there are not enough activities for their young people, to others saying that they need jobs and workforce development, to others saying that, okay, it comes to education, everything from street lighting to speed bumps. Yeah. So those are all things that kind of take an array when we talk about environmental design, which in working with between the police department, code enforcement, and also our streets and utilities, but also other things as far as the activities through Parks and Recreation. So the biggest thing that I've seen and observed so far is that it's not that the city doesn't have a lot of these activities and programs in place. It's just folks aren't necessarily either knowing about them or getting to them. So that will be part of the assessment as far as really working through those barriers to really bridge that gap and what the perceptions are, what some of the fears are, attitudes are, and kind of bridging that gap.
So would it be fair to say that there's a high level of concern?
Again, it depends on where you are. Different parts of the city, the level of concern is higher. The anxiety levels are higher. Some areas that are experiencing higher, violent crime rates are going to feel more angst and anxiety. But then one of the things that I found interesting as well is that you can go in an area of high violent crime based on our data, and there's not a level of concern because it's become normal for them. It's become every day. So that's the scary part as well in actually going out there and seeing. But I'm very optimistic as far as what's out there, what the city is doing, because there are a lot of great works that are being done. It's just getting them in the right places and really creating those partnerships.
Trayvon, who do you report to, Chief Holbrook?
No, sir. I report directly to the city manager,
You wrote to
Ms. Wilson.
city manager. Are you doing page 9, all the prevention, intervention, and enforcement by yourself? Or do
No,
you
sir.
have-
No. So, and we'll get to that where we are. That
Okay.
goes right at you. That's a perfect segue into stage 2 as far as the forming phase after the assessment, after getting and learning the lay of the land. Again, I've been in Columbia the last 14 years, but being at the city level, I'm really focusing in on the city now. So where we are now as far as forming the actual office, that framework that I was provided really looked at an aim of what this office is looking to do as far as the aim of it. And it's in keeping with the city's mission. It's not anything outside of what the city already is looking to do as far as providing exemplary leadership and exemplary services to all, right? What this office is aiming to do is coordinate the city's efforts. So that's all of our departments from Parks and Recreation to the police department to community development when it comes to violent crime reduction strategies. So really doing the coordination, the planning, the alignment through this office, so that when we have any individuals outside of the city that look at saying, hey, what is Columbia doing on this for violence reduction, they would know to come to one centralized office. So that's the aim right there of this office. And here's the goal right here. So again, the city, our goal as far as the Office of Violent Crime Prevention is coordinate the city's violence reduction efforts by developing a holistic approach that takes in evidence-based practices and really looks at the data that we have, all of the data that's available from our police department, from the programs that's being done for Parks and Recreation, but also to look at what our partners are doing across the nation when it comes to violence reduction. Columbia is not unique when it comes to violent crime. We know that. Between our city, our county, our state, our nation, violent crime is everywhere. So we've already been working with some other national partners and getting looped in. I've attended a training with Cities United where I was there for several days and talked to other folks from Denver, from Toledo, Ohio, from St. Louis, from New York. There was another group that was there from DC, from Washington, DC, that's working in the DMV area. So really just picking their brain, see what they're doing as well, what some of the opportunities, also what barriers that they're running into, but also connecting with other areas that are similar to Columbia. So that kind of goes with our goal, is to really use those evidence-based practices, use the data that we have to provide programs, services, and partnerships for all of our community stakeholders working together. And so this is the summary of the office. Again, this derives directly from the framework that was provided to me when I came along, in addition to position description. Essentially, the summary of the office is to devise strategic plans, evaluate and analyze data, implement programs, establish policies, and coordinate resources to promote effective partnerships to prevent and reduce violent crimes in the city of Columbia. All right. And the second part just says that the director of the office will serve as the lead as far as the expert when it comes to consultation to city leadership, as well as working with and being a liaison for our community groups, our organizations, and building those partnerships when it comes to, again, reducing violent crime. One of the things that I saw and really continue to see my observations when it comes to our summary, we've got a lot of passionate people that are doing a lot of great work, but there's not a lot of coordination, particularly in the city of Columbia. So our office actually brings together all of our efforts when it comes to reducing violent crime, and everything's funneling out of this office.
How do you do that? Do you bring them to the table and sit around and talk about what they're doing and what you want to do?
So that's going to be through strategic partnerships, and again, that's covered in another slide coming up.
Yeah.
All right. So when we talk about the office specifically, there are three pillars. There's community engagement and programming. There's the data evaluation, analysis, and strategic planning piece. And there's also development, grants, and assistance. So when you talk about how do we do that, and I talk about those strategic partnerships, it's definitely bring folks to the table. That community engagement piece is huge, very big, because again, the city alone cannot solve this issue by itself. It's going to take some accountability, some partnerships, and also support from business owners, from community stakeholders, but also from residents, all right? So all that comes into our community engagement and programming aspect. And this breaks down each pillar, and I won't go into each bullet point of what each pillar is. But this breaks down what our office will do when it comes to each pillar for community engagement and programming. So really working with community partners, seeing what, if any, gaps exist when it comes to programming, when it comes to activities, bringing together community partners who provide those services already, and just need potentially some support from the city as well, working collaboratively with our neighbors in the county and other jurisdictions. As we all know, crime is not geographically stopped at Columbia. We get individuals that commit crimes in the city that don't live in the city, that live in Richland County, Lexington County, other places, and vice versa. So I know our police department is doing an amazing job in working with law enforcement partners, but we need that to extend to our community organizations as well as our social service providers as well. Myself and the mayor attended a meeting, and we sat down with some social service providers and talked about what those partnerships would look like. So those are the types of conversations we're talking about, bringing folks together to really bridge that gap and meet those needs of what the community is asking for. And that's going to be done through community engagement and programming.
Will the schools be a part of this as well?
Yes, sir. We've already met with actually the superintendent last week.
What's
What's that?
Richland
Richland one. So we put together some initiatives and put it before him. We did get some preliminary approvals on some, and some they're still working on. We've got a follow-up meeting with their dropout prevention and their mentorship coordinator tomorrow. So we've actually had several meetings with the school district to work with them. Because again, what we've seen and what we know, and from my background, law enforcement, particularly being an SRO, what happens on the weekend in the neighborhoods or in the evenings spills right into the school. And then beefs that happen in the school spill into the neighborhood on weekends and later on. So we've got to have that connectedness when it comes to programming, when it comes to activities. We've already received blessing from working with the school district on some mentoring programs, and also as far as to be able to set up and provide prevention, education, materials, brochures at district games. So football games, basketball games, working with specific schools. So those are things we're going to be rolling out as well too. What I talked about, all of our community groups, like I said, there are a lot of them that are doing great work, but they're all kind of either in silos, although they're doing the same exact thing, but there's not a lot of coordination, right? So with that, we want to be able to catalog our existing resources from the city and our community partners to be able to say, okay, for those who are in this group who are looking for a mentoring program, here's a mentoring program that's operating. Or who's looking for something gender specific when it comes to young girls, here's a mentorship program particularly for girls. So we're working to do that as well, to catalog the available resources, but also to bring in social service partners when we talk about substance use, when we talk about mental health, things that the city is already utilizing in other areas, looking to extend those. The biggest key that a lot of folks will talk about is highest risk. We can all talk about what highest risk is. The definition may vary of what highest risk means. Some folks will say your highest risk if you live in a particular area code or zip code. That's not necessarily the case. From everything that we've done in trying to establish our community-based violence intervention, or our CVI ecosystem, we've come up with some definitions and working with our police department and others to really define what highest risk would look like here in the city of Columbia.
You know, I was wondering too, thinking about the schools and employers in the area, is there an opportunity to work with Richland 1 and 2 on jobs for high school students? We've tried that approach, and we just haven't seemed to figure out how to make it happen. I think you see a lot of employers in the area that would be happy to have high school juniors and seniors as part of a after school work program or a summer work program. In Columbia, you end up with those types of jobs going to the people that you know already, not the people that you don't know.
And those are some of the things that came up in our meeting. The city actually has partnerships existing when it comes to our JAG program that was working with local high schools for Richland 1. There's the One City initiative as well. So there are several initiatives when it comes to workforce development. What we're looking at is strengthening those and seeing how we can enhance them to make sure that they're working properly. But there are some existing initiatives when it comes to workforce development, working with the school district. And there are some others that, again, as we're talking about what that will look like with the district, continuous ideas as well.
I think both the districts have to also, take some leadership with us in
Me too.
advertising these opportunities that have been created. I think Richland 2, for example, there was a whole signing of the program. I'm not sure if
Yes, ma'am.
Director Javis has met with you about it, but we have a program through the City of Columbia right now, but it's with Richland 2, and it is for jobs for their students to work with the City of Columbia. But they really pushed it at the time. There was like a whole signing ceremony with all the different companies that were going to be involved with it, and we participated. I don't know if Pam may have more details. I don't remember all the name of it and everything, but they're there. It almost feels like, though, that to Travon's point,
I think it's a connected dot issue,
that it's
right?
there,
It's a
right?
connected dot issue, but there's got to be, if someone says, well, I know that Colite has, available, 6 available spots, well, then someone still has to connect those dots. To the people, and the business. And that's the key. And I think, I've circled the word coordinate, I think at least 3 times already. So we gotta coordinate. I mean, you're right. You gotta coordinate this stuff. It's,
And at some point, someone has to be the person that owns making sure it gets done. that the coordination gets done. And I guess with this program with Richland too, do we have any students placed?
We do, I don't remember if it's just the summer, I mean, Pam may be able to speak to it in Denise's absence, I'm not sure, I wanna put her on the spot, but she would know
and
best.
Yeah, and I don't.
You're on the
I
spot.
don't- Well, no, and again, Ms. Pam, I don't need like great details, but it's more or less, did it get started?
Yeah.
And are we continuing to do it?
Yes, it definitely got started, and there are individuals at the school districts that coordinate the students. You know, they identify which students would be great to be placed in different departments in different areas, and then they work with the students and the parents, you know, because they have to have transportation to the job, and they have to have all of those things. We are very successful in our fleet department. We have a lot of the students that are working in fleet management to get their mechanics and get certifications. That's been a really strong one. And we've got some in a couple other departments. I can't remember them right now off the top of my head. But there is a very good relationship between the HR department here at the city and the coordinators at the districts to work through those programs. Because all of the school districts are supposed to have someone that's in that capacity to place the students and work with students and to locate opportunities at Colite and other organizations.
And I would love
But,
to.
but
I
like
think
Ms. Wilson said, they really honestly have to be the ones out there beating the pavement, identifying those opportunities. We just know we have a partnership with them. But yes, there's lots of other opportunities out there, and hopefully through Travon's coordination with those school districts, we can expand on that and make sure they're aware that that's a gap that's missing, that they're really not capitalizing on the opportunities that are out there.
And I would love to help you with the connections to the business community as part of this. Because I really, you know, I think education and jobs, you know, and you mentioned both of those. I mean, that's still the most sustainable pathway to success.
Yeah, absolutely, because those at risk are often those that, you know, don't see a future, don't have any opportunities. And if we can show them those things, then that'll lower that at-risk population, for sure.
So we're putting this in Travon's bucket?
Well, again, he's a coordinator, so
Not to create,
right.
to help coordinate.
Exactly. So again, he
Somebody
has,
just needs to own it.
exactly. He has the contacts with HR department, who in turn have the contacts with the districts, and then all those things work together. So I think if he could identify either neighborhoods or certain areas that we want to encourage the school districts to concentrate on finding students from those areas, I think that those are the things that we are trying to make those connections. But he's great at building those partnerships and relationships internally and externally. And so those are the things that we want to really utilize him to do.
Love it.
And so our office definitely aligns with that, because when we talk about reducing and preventing violent crime, so many people are taking a one-prong approach that's not necessarily been working as effective as they'd liked. We understand and we realize that it's going to take prevention, intervention, and the enforcement piece, right? But with that, we've really got to provide some resources when it gets down to housing, when it comes to economics, jobs, workforce development, education, the healthcare piece. And also, so all of those things loop into when we talk about preventing and reducing violent crime. So with that workforce piece, as far as an economic development, we're definitely working on that as well too, with the school districts, but with other partners as well. And so I talked about who would be labeled as at risk. Our numbers are actually comparable to the national numbers when it comes to the age range of those who are deemed at risk, as defined by the the Center for Disease Control, Department of Justice. And this data was received from, that part as far as the age range is based on those who have been victimized as of in the last 5 years. And that data was received from the Columbia Police Department. So that's our age range when we talk about prevention services and reduction services. But also those who have family members or a family history when it comes to violent crime. We all know that there are some folks who go along that path because they have other family members who are gang members or who are career criminals. That's what they see. That's what they know. That would put them at risk. Folks who are recently released from jail or prison. So when we talk about reintegration, when we talk about reentry services, working with service providers for those types of referrals as well is going to be important. So there are a number of different factors that we've kind of labeled and designate who is our at-risk population. Why is that important? Because we can have programs to stop young people or stop families from a prevention standpoint. We can have the intervention programs once someone's going along the path, but there's still a target population as we talk about that small percentage of folks that commit a lot of our violent crime. Those are who are at our highest risk. So we're also going to have programming activities and services directly for them. And so that's why it was important for us to really designate who our highest risk population is.
Real quick, so when you talk about prevention, if someone's already at high risk, is that reasonable that we're in a prevention mode already? I mean, or is it too late?
For them, it could be too late. So again, the prevention folks will be for prevention to prevent them. That's your positive youth development. That's your mentoring thing. Those are all the things on the front end. When we talk about some folks who are committing violent crimes, we that intervention or the enforcement piece.
Well, that's what I was getting. I mean, really, the prevention is for the group before this group.
Correct. And so that's why we're going to take a tiered approach.
This is the enforcement group.
Correct.
And the prevention group, which is everybody else that's not in this group.
Now, and to some point as well, some of the folks as far as the enforcement group, and that's why we included in there those who are released, because there are some individuals that after they get released from jail or prison, they're coming right back to our community. So with that part of it, we're seeing a lot of repeat offenders because they don't have those skills, they don't have the education, they're not finding jobs, so crime is their avenue.
And I guess, just for clarity, so when I see socially connected to violence, I don't see that as someone who is too far gone. I see that as someone, if we don't give them a brighter path or some type of intervention
Correct.
doesn't
That would be the
happen,
intervention.
then their expected outcome would be to be.
Yeah, I get that. I'm with
Correct.
you 100%.
Yeah.
I guess what I was, the more boxes you check up here,
Yeah.
the more problems that we got. So I
Yeah.
guess that's what I was looking at. It's like, it makes sense actually, the way it's laid out like this, that's, you know, so, but I guess, and I think you're right, but I guess what I was saying is if you check enough boxes on here, you're probably in a different category than we're talking about.
And so to that point, this is our whole entire comprehensive, all of our programs. So this isn't directly saying, okay, you have to have all of these and you fall into prevention or all these intervention. We're saying with different aspects of these what are the highest risk kind of factors, right?
Right, okay.
Now, what we look at as far as prevention or intervention or the other side of it, that will depend on of course, the individuals coming in. But again, this is in totality. And that's why we're taking a comprehensive approach of not just one way, but we're looking at it from prevention, intervention, and an enforcement standpoint. And that was really a big piece that was honed in on what others have failed on, is that they just wanted to take a one-prong approach. And so we want to make sure that we have programs, activities, and services, particularly for prevention, particularly for intervention, then on that back piece of reentry or reintegration, but also the enforcement piece as well.
And well, and it's not a discussion for today, but at some point I do want to discuss weapons carrier. Because some people, I just went through a self-defense course, so I carry weapons.
Correct.
But that I am allowed to carry, so maybe how we characterize a weapons carrier.
Definitely.
I don't want y'all to think I'm high
Definitely.
risk, because I might check a couple of.
And so
You're a legal
again-
weapons carrier.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, you know,
Tina's packing.
but that, not for a discussion today, but just as a
Correct,
thought.
And that is something that we looked at when we were putting this together. The premise behind it is when we're talking about just general as far as who could be at risk most, having those weapons on you, whether illegal or not, utilizing it in the wrong manner, right? So, but that is something we can definitely clean up
So
and
you're saying
characterize.
I belong on that list?
I'm saying
Just
that
one check
term is
mark.
on the
But no,
list.
but
Your
that
name's
is
not on there now.
but that is a theory that I have heard some people say, that the mere fact that you carry a gun for prevention actually increases the likelihood that you will use the gun because you have it. Like, it adds to it, yeah. So anyway.
And again, we can clean that up. Particularly, I know right now there is a huge mindset, and I don't want to say culture, but it's becoming a culture of young people carrying guns because they say they need to feel protection and they don't feel
That's what
safe,
everyone, yeah.
right? So
Everyone says.
not understanding that A, you're not old enough to actually be carrying that weapon on you. There are laws that prevent that, but getting to the other side of it is, as a society, what's making you feel so unsafe? Getting to that root cause. So again, this is what we've kind of just come up with our initial definitions as far as who, when we are providing services, when we're looking at referrals, when we're looking at programs, that's our kind of guideline to it.
I think when you go back and what you were talking about before, that's why I was asking about some of the community input. I think there's in today's world, there's a high level of anxiety.
There is.
There's a high level of just feeling of not safe, and you can't, whoever feels not safe, that's you can't explain to them that that's not their feelings.
Correct.
It is what it is, and
Correct.
that's we have developed this culture of, I don't want to say fear, maybe that's strong, but culture of concern.
Correct.
I mean, we just have, and so that's why I like, I like the concept of how we're engaging. I think you have to engage people first, and then I think the data backs up the engagement, right?
Correct.
I think too, of knowing Mr. Brown a little bit now and how he's thinking probably, I would I guess describe this period of time, these 90 days that Trevon has been in as, due diligence and discovery and beginning now to get the lay of the land, start getting more of the data. But what he's describing in that previous slide describes, kind of the buffet of potential services of who's at risk. But I also know that as a city and with resources being limited, he's gonna then have to drill down on where can we be most impactful and within what frames of time and how, and to the point of, is it the anxiety level? Can we hone in on those things, the why behind that, and how we can bring the temperature down a little bit? What are the things as a city that he can be most effective at doing when he is connecting the dots of collaboration with the schools or the businesses? Is that where we really need to start? Because I agree with you sometimes, because we're trying to do so much between Parks and Recreation and now with him in place, police, at some point we have to figure out where can we make the biggest difference and where can we put our resources. As the next step with the funding that council had set aside, is there are many groups who, as he's seeing, like Serve and Connect, they built their brand, they've got resources behind them, they're doing wonderful things. But there's not probably a week that goes by that I don't get a call from just a grassroots person in a neighborhood or through a church or whatever who wants to do something, but they're a little bit at a loss as to the how and where they can be folded into, programmatically folded into doing something impactful. And I think what we'll get to a point to come back to you on, probably best through this committee, is with the funding that maybe we've allocated, how do we then begin to build an opportunity for him to not do all the work, but be a facilitator, and maybe there's some type of opportunity for grants or whatever that we can then say, hey, we know this is working right now. You want to be a part of something, you can bring impact to this particular segment of the community. And he's that, bridge builder
Correct.
for that, or convener of additional people together to make a difference. So
It is connecting the dots.
it is, and we're gonna have to figure out what that ultimate really looks like so that we're actually, he's doing, I'm not saying he's not, but this is kind of the figuring it out piece.
Right.
But then once we do that, we're gonna have to come back to y'all to say, okay, how do you wanna literally, give, people to impact for service delivery?
he needs to have a long list of different service providers and what
Uh-huh.
service so when he gets a situation here, he can
Yeah.
go down his list, well, this one will fit over there,
That's right.
and connect the dots.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he can't do the programs.
No,
He
Right.
just has to know
Right.
about the programs.
that's right.
He doesn't have time to do the program.
And so going back to that, and it'll be in the summary as well. That's pretty much what this office is looking to do: the coordination piece, cataloging and bringing together existing resources, not necessarily being the resource for everyone or everything, but being able to, as far as having that available for citizens and residents when it comes to community organizations that are doing the work, going there. When we talk about the data analysis, evaluation, strategic planning, again, just really putting together the plans when it comes to violence reduction, working with our police department and the fire department as well when it comes to different reporting, and coming up with crime prevention and intervention strategies. Again, that's just another slide when it talks about some of the functions of the office when it comes to data analysis, evaluation, and strategic planning. We'll go through all of that.
One quick question too, with respect to your data, are you pulling data, have access to data, or are you having to build data?
So right now we're utilizing existing data. A lot of it's the crime data from the police department that we're utilizing. As we move forward and start looking at different aspects, well, let's say we're looking at something that deals with code enforcement or deal with fire hazards, we may reach out to different departments. Or if we're looking at data as far as how many programs our Parks and Recreation Department is doing, we would reach out to them. So we're definitely going to utilize the data we have available. And as we start working and moving forward, then we'll compile a report each year as far as our violence prevention initiatives from all of our different departments across the city.
I think we're fortunate, to your point, Councilwoman Herbert, that we have this real-time data that Chief Holbrook and those have been really wonderful about beefing that up, and it's readily available to the point that even with the most recent tragic events of the last few days, I've noticed, even though that was in the county, the data that's being reported is city data. And, and it doesn't matter because it's all our community. But the data that I've seen reported is their data.
It says Columbia.
It does. They attribute it to them. So it's not a bad thing. It's good data.
Yeah, I know you might mention this, but talk a little bit about, when you get a chance, about the parent engagement piece as well.
Okay.
Something to that.
And I'll get to that now because that was one of the things in the initial slide. But again, talking to community folks, organizers, that's one of the things that they really harped on is that parent engagement piece, that accountability piece. That's so important, right? There are community organizations that right now, that's what they specialize in. Going in, working with youth, working with their families, working with those who are deemed at highest risk. That's what they specialize in.
What was the name again?
I didn't say, just there are a few community organizations.
Oh.
I didn't say one specifically. Yeah. So with that being said, we just worked with one last week to where they've got a grant, but they don't have a target audience. They don't have anybody to work with. So again, as a city, those are things where we're talking about connecting dots. They've grant money sitting there. So that's one of the things that really came up, is not just working with youth and those who are that in between population of teenagers and the young adults, but also as far as with parents, because that's going to be important when we talk about parental support with young people, but also as far as with them and workforce development, and we talk about those type of things too. So we're really looking to partner with community organizations who are doing that work and see how we can support and align with them to really connect the dot on those services. All right, from the development grants and assistance piece. This office was tasked as far as identifying funding opportunities, grant dollars, federal grant dollars, particular state, to really put together a plan for our violence reduction and intervention strategies. Eventually, we would also like to get to a point to where we're also making mini grants or sub-awards to community organizations to support them for doing the work in the city of Columbia. That'll be down the road. But we will actually put together, some of it will be mirrored to what community development is already doing with their grants, and really tailoring a process to do mini grants or sub-awards to assist community organizations who are doing the work. But the other part of that will be securing funding, going after funding, identifying funding specifically for community violence reduction, violence intervention, Also, some things as far as other aspects when it deals with reducing violence and creating that plan and a budget as well too. I will say, and this is coming before the full council next week, that we actually put in an application for the Bureau of Justice Assistance, JAG local solicitation for an allocation for the City of Columbia. So that would provide some anchor as well too with those funds. But that was one of the few ones that was still available as I came in the office. So as I was researching, as we start looking next year when the funding cycle starts back January, February, we are looking at several different funding pots that we can partner with different departments for the city, but also external partners as well too, like the school district. We've talked to them about after school mentoring and what those partnerships will look like to secure funding. Because it's always better when we talk about really having those strategic partnerships for the community. So that's the that piece of that as far as the
On
development
your
grants.
agenda for Tuesday, so I'll see that for your approval.
Are we approving a grant application or?
It's a part of that,
Okay.
that process for them, that it had to come before the council.
Correct. It's one of the certifications and assurances before our chief executive officer, Ms. Wilson, can sign it. It has to be reviewed by the governing body.
Gotcha.
So the other part to development grants and assistance is really connecting residents and service providers to enrichment skills. When we talk about the education, we talk about jobs, when we talk about social services, being that connection there to kind of give them alternatives away from destructive lifestyles. Everybody here, when we make decisions based on what we have available and what we think the result could be, right? So most of our decisions or the outcomes are usually positive and successful because that's what we have in front of us. Everybody doesn't have that opportunity when it comes to. So in them making decisions, just trying to connect those dots, really put them in touch with alternatives for them to, if they accept it and they're willing to take those programs and services, can really take them away from destructive lifestyles. The other part is providing training and technical assistance for other local governments, community stakeholders, as we talk about violence reduction and intervention. I've been in this thing for, like I said, the last 14 years. So I've done trainings. I've done trainings at the local level, state level, even at the national level. So we can provide those trainings to our local community organizations, as well as other stakeholders. And also as far as what technical assistance will look like. As we move forward and we start talking about our mini grants, our sub-award process, we want to make sure that folks actually understand what that process is. So that's having a grant workshop or grant 101. Again, when we talk about providing resources to community groups, it's not always going to be us giving funding. Sometimes it could be us connecting them to a source where they can get the funding. Sometimes it could be the assistance piece as far as them connecting them to get that done as well from a technical assistance standpoint. All right. So that's kind of where we were, where we are. Now we're talking about the planning stage of where we're looking to go as an office. So stage 3 is what we're coming upon. Next step, definitely need to hire staff, another individual at least, to coordinate the efforts that we're doing.
You can do all of this by yourself?
I'm trying. I'm definitely trying. But as we all know, when we're talking about coordinating community events, it is tough for one person to be at 3 places at once. And then the one thing about it, and I'll show that in a second, is once your name starts getting out there, once the office starts getting out there, people start calling upon you more. So we're getting invites to come sit in community groups, to have lunch with folks, to come talk about violence prevention. To folks at their churches are having different events, and they're calling upon the office to come out and be part of it. So
All the inquiries I get, I'm sending them right
correct.
on
And
over
then you
to
get it from
Oh,
Liz,
yeah.
obviously,
Oh,
Andrew. So, but that's definitely an emphasis with that, with the funding that we do have as far as at least hiring another individual. We're also working to establish an internal work group. Again, the city is doing a lot of great things when it comes to violence reduction. I will say it, and this is not a knock, but just when folks think about violence reduction, everybody thinks Chief Holbrook and the Columbia Police Department. They don't think about how Parks and Recreation has a place in that, how community development has a place in that, how economic development has a place in that, how solid waste has a place in that, right? So bringing together our departments to work together on our violence reduction strategies internally. So we're working on that. Again, coordinating available resources. The website for the office, a link to the City of Columbia will be up soon. So we're start building that, and we're building on that, and we're talking about cataloging resources for community groups. When folks say, hey, I need this mentoring, I need this, that will be listed on there. All of our violence reduction efforts will be on there. Right now, if you do open source, folks will have to go different places to see what the city of Columbia is doing for violence reduction efforts. A lot of that will be streamlined onto the website here soon. And again, these are all the other different things as far as community different programs, the trainings, looking to host violence prevention community meetings, also a symposium. And I'm just looking at this, of course, researching those funding opportunities, providing that technical assistance. The key thing on there is really identifying our community-based violence intervention ecosystem. Talk a little bit about CVI, or community-based violence intervention ecosystem, right? That's not us doing a mentorship program. That's not necessarily a Parks and Recreation event, right? When we talk about CVI, that's working directly with those who are deemed at highest risk. So that's what I'm saying, there's tiers to this. That's what it's designated towards. So we talk about the police department and ceasefire project. That falls under our CVI, because that's dealing directly with those at highest risk, right? That have been identified, that are some violent offenders or just are at risk. So we've got to continue to build on our CVI system. The other thing that we're really going to build upon is our partnerships with our health-based network, our hospitals. I know, again, from being a former police officer, sometimes you get a call of a shooting, you go there and there's nobody there, right? 10 minutes later, you get a call from Prisma. Hey, there's a body here. Or hey, there's someone that came in with a gunshot wound. Investigators go there, talk to folks. Oh, I don't know, I was shot. That's a bullet hole? What? Didn't know that. So they're not cooperative with law enforcement, but yet they talk to staff at the hospital and things like that. So the hospitals have data that's not really being access shared to the level that it can be right now. So we're looking to enhance that partnership with our health-based partners. So data sharing will be important, because then we can also identify more trends of gunshot wounds, of domestic violence victims, of sexual assault survivors as well too, by establishing those networks as well. So from an education-based, when we talk about a school-based program, a health-based program, and then all of that will fall under our CVI ecosystem, right? So that is that piece as far as where we're going in the next steps. I wanted to share a few pictures again, since I've been out and about from beginning to last week getting dunked. I thought it was interesting. Greenview has their newsletter that they do each month. They did a feature on little old me in our department. So I thought that was interesting. And there are several other pictures. And then, of course, with Serve and Connect being out there. So we're really trying to make an imprint of working with community partners on the ground, finding out their needs, finding out what the identification is, and really bridging that gap, because that's what it's all about when it comes to building those relationships and connecting those dots. And that's what our office seeks to do. So those are just some of the highlights. Again, meeting with the school district already, having some speaking engagements already, attending several different community events, being on track now as far as with the assessment that we're going to release. The website coming up is another big one. The application, getting it in for the BJA grant. Y'all, there's been a lot of different things in the last 90 days that we can really build upon, and we're going to build upon. Fortunately, I say this, right now we are the only entity in the state of South Carolina with an established Office of Violent Crime Prevention. I think folks really need to know that, understand that. Not to say we're boasting when we say that, because we want to see other municipalities, other cities and counties go along with that. But we've got an opportunity to really be transformative and really provide a blueprint of what it could look like to bring folks together and really connect the dots. So as I get to the summary, again, this office or its director will serve as the quarterback to centralize all of our efforts when it comes to direction, coordinating, aligning, and supporting our violence prevention, intervention, and also working with our police department and law enforcement agencies as far as enforcement. That's going to be done, again, through assessments and really looking at environmental factors, which, again, is already being done, cataloging and coordinating available resources, working with community members to connect them to other services, and also identifying and securing funding that's designated to violence prevention, intervention, and reduction efforts. Bringing some numbers. What I've started doing is just keeping track of a monthly report of different things. My first month or first week, in the last week of June, it shows what kind of the numbers as far as meetings. Went from 3 to 31 last month. But one of the things that's really important is the community events. Going from 1 in that week of June to really 13 already last month. And we're probably going to clip that for this month. not just going and showing up, going networking, talking to folks. And in turn, we've got folks that are wanting to partner with the city when it comes to violence reduction, when it comes to connecting those dots. And again, that's how we're finding out about folks who have grant dollars and don't have anyone to share it with, or that they have these services and just need a little bit of coordination. So that's kind of been the biggest thing, is really getting out of the office, getting into communities, working with folks as we move forward. The other thing has been after incident interventions, and I know you may see that on there. After incident interventions have been things that where we find out about as far as through the police department and their channels, really going out, looking at the layout. As we all, or folks who may not know, a lot of times when you talk about crime, it's usually layered in. There are some aspects that usually kind of occur, particularly when we talk about the environmental factors. A lot of times it's near vacant houses, vacant buildings, vacant lots, which I know we do a great job as a city with our Blight program and really kind of taking care of structures that are a nuisance or just removing them. But those are some of the things that I know a few months ago, and there was a shooting that happened off Two Notch, and I went there and it happened right next to a cut or a vacant lot. So one of those things you look at, you can kind of see, right? What's on paper, you see it, okay? When you also talk about talking to business owners, residents that are in those areas, those are the things that we talk about when we talk about after incident interventions, when we're receiving that information from the police department, how we're responding, and how we're connecting dots to provide. One of the things was just simply the house that got shot, talking to the grandmother, because she wanted to move, was afraid, and was asking about resources. What resources we had. So really connected her with not only victim services, but also with the Attorney General's office to see what they can do through the Victims Compensation Fund. So again, connecting those dots after incidents are some of the things that this office is doing as well. And as we really kind of define what that's going to look like in working with CPD, that's going to continue to progress as well too. All right, so the overall goal of the office, connect those dots. Working together to reduce violent crime in the city of Columbia and create safer communities. Contact information. And that concludes the presentation or the update.
I would also love to be kept in the loop of your activity in District 4.
Okay.
So if you have some type of meeting or community event, I would love to tag along with you when I can.
Will do. Definitely. And that's something that we're looking at as well too, as far as how we're looking at potentially in a calendar on the actual OVCP website or the office website of events and things that are being sent. But a lot of times things will get, like I've got one for tonight that they sent me today.
I get that.
But I would definitely, as those things come up,
I'm a last minute thought.
yeah, as things come up, we'll definitely, definitely kind
I
of
get
keep
it.
you all in the loop with that. So that's something we're looking at and still working on, is how we can keep everybody in the loop, because that's what it's going to take, is those partnerships to connect the dots.
Great.
Great job.
Great job.
Excellent presentation. Thank you for doing that.
So I just wanted to follow up, Ms. Wilson. I went back to ask HR about the programs with the districts. So the one that's with District 1, it's called One City Future Ready. And the other one is with Richland County, with the school district 2, and that's Premier to Career. And we actually were able to place during the school year some students in Parks and Recreation, in the IT department, in business licensing. In the summers, we have Fleet, Parks and Rec, Public Works, engineering, and business licensing once again. It was a little bit difficult during the school year with the student schedules and getting them back and forth. So they're working on fine tuning that. And we have a more of an emphasis for the summer for this coming spring and school year. So Mr. Brown will certainly connect with you to see whether there's
I
some
really do think it's
opportunities
an opportunity with the
for
business
for
community,
yours.
especially with, we have employment issues. And I think a lot of, there's always misconceptions everywhere. And we have a factory, but it's not the factory of yesterday, it's the factory of tomorrow.
Right.
And I think a lot of people would say, well, I don't want to work in a factory. Well, it just happens to be a pretty nice building with air conditioning. So It's not
And
exactly.
a lot of technology
Yeah, right.
and some of those
Technology,
things that
yeah.
they're not thinking about.
And a good opportunity for a career.
It's a lack of exposure.
Yeah.
Right,
That-
right.
That they may have some preconceived notion of something.
Or just no notion.
Or no.
Yeah, no
no
notion,
notion.
right, right.
They have to be exposed, these
And-
students have to be exposed.
And there's a lot of companies like us, we don't, and because we don't do a lot of local business, we don't talk about ourselves, so we go about our business and we don't advertise, who we are, why we are, or what we're doing. So I think there's a lot of businesses like that.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks.
Chief Obert, glad to have you with us. Anything you'd like to say to the committee?
I am seeing,
Yeah, thank you, Chief.
Trayvon is making his rounds. I think he's doing a great job, and he is hustling. You all, I don't want to tell you all how many meetings we have every single week. And he is, not only is he typically where we are, the police department, but he's touching those touch points that we don't. And I think that's where his role is going to be really important. From a business standpoint, Giffords Law Center estimates a fatal gun crime costs everybody about a little over $800,000.
Wow.
That's the community impact. So this is far reaching, and it's exciting really to see what's going to come out of this. And he's got our full support. Anything that we can do to assist to move this needle, like we talk about, and we appreciate all the investment you all have and the confidence you have in us and what we're doing, our programming. I think the best is yet to come from this office.
And I think that goes back to the conversations we have a lot, which is, money's fluid. It's not black and white. There's downstream effects for everything. And the more investment you put in on the front end, hopefully the better investment you get at the back end.
Yeah,
Very good.
appreciate it. Great.
Either one of you have anything else?
Nope. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, we will be adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.